Hey, good morning. Welcome back, folks. And this morning we are continuing our discussion on pre-K, specifically with regard to trying to figure out if we can do anything about fingerprinting slash background checks and recognizing it's a complicated topic. But we are fortunate to have Deputy Commissioner McLaughlin back to both give us feedback on the language that is in the current draft of the bill and to I'm sure she's going to explain to us why that's not going to work. So
But she's going to give us a solution.
but yeah, probably not. And also we wanted to make sure you had the information that Beth had, Ledge Council had provided to us, which you were probably already familiar with, but just want to make sure that all of us were working with the same information. And, what was, when we were talking to with Sue yesterday from the school board, she was the School Boards Association, but on behalf of all three of school board superintendents and principals association, one of the specific pieces of feedback was, about school employees needing to have two background checks and the double background check. And it wasn't our understanding that private providers needed to have a double background check. And now we understand why, because of that provision in the statute that seems to address it, going that direction. So we were trying to figure out if there was a way for us to make that easier. And so thank you for being here.
Yes, so happy to be here. So again, Janet McLaughlin, Deputy Commissioner in the Child Development Division within the Department for Children and Families. And first, I will say, I have not had time to coordinate with my colleagues at Agency of Education and the Department of Public Safety on this topic specific to the solution that you guys are proposing right now. But we have been doing, have had a multi-agency work group since last June that has really been trying to address the issues related to fingerprint supported background checks. And so in terms of what you are, the things that you're thinking about right now, I would offer that there's both like the legal considerations and the practical considerations. And so, and then sort of what my understanding is of where we are in terms of current practice. So, from the Child Development Division's perspective, we know based on our federal Child Care Development Fund standards that we need to do these pretty comprehensive background checks that have to include a fingerprint supported background check, both in-state, both an in-state criminal history check as well as an FBI criminal history check. And we have to do that as a requirement of then licensing a facility as a regulated childcare facility in the state of Vermont. And the only entity in the state that is approved to do is approved to do the federal background, those FBI background checks, is the Vermont Crime Information Center, and they also then host that in-state criminal history check as well. So all roads lead through the Vermont Crime Information Center here. And I will say, and the checks that the federal government requires for childcare providers has at least one extra layer beyond what is required of the school district than what school districts are required to do. Now, my challenge is I don't know fully what are the federal standards that in terms of the background checks that school districts are required to do. I'm unclear what are the federal standards that are guiding them and where that flexibility is. So that's just so you know, like I don't know that answer. So I would again have to coordinate with my colleagues on that piece of it. But the practice right now, right, is that all the school districts and or SUs, right, whoever the employer is, also needs, they are also getting a fingerprint supported background check for their employees. There's a couple of things that are different. There's a couple things that are different besides just the fact that there's an extra layer of checks. So one of the things that is different is that school districts have 90 days, I believe, that somebody can be working with children, like before their fingerprint. They have up to 90 days to be able to still work with children. For CDD, for childcare, right? You can't start working alone with children until you have the results of those fingerprint supported background checks. Whereas on the school side, they can start. They probably would have had other non-fingerprint supported checks. So they have great information actually on those folks that are working with children. We do those same checks. But there is a little bit more flexibility on the school side in that for them. And then the other thing is that at least this is based on my understanding. I have spent, I would say, at least 100 hours learning about background checks and fingerprint supported background checks in the last year. So it's not terrible information. I think I have that on the federal level or based on federal rules, state agencies are not allowed to share the results of fingerprint supported background checks with one another, right? Mm-hmm. But school districts actually can share results with one another. And so, right, that it is, so from the school district's perspective, right, it does feel like a big pain, right, to go through the CDD process because it doesn't have this 90-day waiver, right? It doesn't have, you can't share results, right? Like it's like, and again, it takes a little long. It does have an extra check on it. So sometimes the results that come back take a little longer. So there's a little context of like why they're like, this feels so different to us. I will also say that, but we have, the current rules we have right now say that to run a school-based childcare program, it needs to be regulated by CDD. That was part of, school-based pre-kindergarten program, right? Is part of the rules are they need to be regulated by CDD because that is the foundational health and safety standards for young children, right? And that we do actually have people that go out that are going out to the programs, have the expertise on, is this facility safe for 3 and 4 year olds, like are doing those checks, have investigation capabilities that exceed what was available for the school district. So that's been the process.
And those are all, Janet, those are all things that we want to maintain. So so I'm going to ask sort of a basic question. Okay. We understand that in both cases, at the federal education level and at the federal child development level, there's requirements for background checks and they don't match, they're different. They have similar elements, but it's not an exact match. The question that I raised yesterday was, mm-hmm. in pre-K, and I'm not talking about childcare now. Okay, yep. So yep. We're not talking about a program. I'm just talking about pre-K on the public side. Mm-hmm. No federal CDD dollars going into that. 100% funded by education dollars during the pre-K time. Why do they need to meet federal CDD or CDD background check?
Yeah. So that has been a requirement of being a pre-qualified pre-kindergarten program. And that was a decision that was made, right, when universal pre-kindergarten, when Act 166 was passed.
We could change it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to say, to change it, that's a huge decision. Like, just to be clear, like, just to change it, this is a thing that we absolutely want to have as part of these UPK alignment discussions, that we've hired a vendor to work with us on. This is the key. We know that this is one of the key issues. And so, and this question around duplication is one of the key issues. And so that is absolutely a core part of that work. But to decide to not have, it would be a really big decision to decide that you didn't want to have school-based pre-kindergarten programs to be licensed by CDD anymore. That would change.
That's not what we're saying.
But
That is
but you
not
are,
what we're
if you're saying they can't be, if you're saying that they don't need to do the CDD background check, then they can't be licensed. Are you saying it the opposite direction? Sorry, the bill has gone back and forth.
It has, and we actually talked about the opposite direction of having the CDD background check meet essentially to be deemed to meet the education requirement. The difference here is how the difference for us is how the services are being funded, and and by whom, and that's the requirement that we have to meet. So there is no pre-K, there is no CDD funding, whether at the federal or state level, other than I will say the expense of your staff is a cost, but there's no funding going into pre-K on the public side. It's funded 100% with public education dollars, and so the language that we're proposing is that it be deemed to meet the background check requirement for CDD licensure, if you will. Not that we don't have CDD licensure of pre-K programs. And that's a very big distinction. And we're not making a policy decision about not have, we agree, and all the testimony so far, with the exception of the school people, have said to maintain joint oversight, and the bill is reflective of that, and we want to continue that. But I think that I feel like that there is a solution that we need to think about from a practical perspective that doesn't impact the safety of children, and still allows the CDD licensure. And for me, it focuses on who is paying for the service. And so, so I'm just asking you to think about that. And and I'm not saying, we definitely get all the requirements that CDD has for the background check, and are 100% behind you. If you can find some, I know you're working and been working with this group of folks to try to simplify this. It doesn't make sense from our policy perspective to, because it's a requirement of CDD licensure, to say you now have to have them both done when there's no CDD money going into that program.
Yeah, I think I do hear what you're saying. I think there's at least two different potential solutions here.
Yeah.
That, and again, our AOE and CDD's intention was to explore this, right? Like
I realize we're getting out ahead of you. I understand.
Yeah, so it's getting ahead of us there. But right, because one option, I think if you remove that particular requirement, then we probably need to create a different license type that's specific to public operated pre-K programs, potentially. Like, that would be the way to do it. Or another option would be to write in the health and safety requirements into public school rules. Like, there's different options there that, again, we wanted to spend some time thinking through what those options would be. I would also say, when I read the part of the law that that Beth shared this morning, I read it differently. So that's where I want to consult with my colleagues, because I see it
Yeah.
as saying that superintendents, they can accept CDD's background checks, that's already allowed because they own run public schools and independent and headmasters or whatever, right? They are running a childcare facility, a licensed childcare facility. And it says that they can, that they don't have to do the background checks if they're licensed by us, which means they're relying on our background checks. So that's how I'm reading that. So I feel like that exception for the school way might already be built in here, but it's not right now. That's not been practical for the schools because of the timeline for the fingerprint supported background checks. And again, that is something that, again, we and RF, we have we made the plan, we raised the money, and we should be getting the request for proposals for the technology system that the state would need out the door in the next week or so, based on our request for information, what seemed like a quick turnaround. So we're working on that, like the timeliness issue. And that I will say, when we had our multi-agency group meet, we did decide that step one was we decided to phase it and say sort of phase one was anything that we could do internally to like streamline things. Phase two was let's get the timeliness issue. We have to get the timeliness happening. We need the timeline right now is too extended. And then phase three was to address duplication. So it's on our mind, but that's how we've been thinking about it. So.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, just looking quickly, what seems to differ between the CDD check and the school licensing check is the interstate check, which is required, like if you live in another state, that's the one that can be delayed 90 days because if you put down another state, then they go back and check that state. Whereas the school does not, they can request it, but it's not mandatory. Whereas the CDD has the three checks, the FBI check, the state check, and are required to do the interstate check. That's probably why the school would accept that, because that is a higher level of check. So I think where we're getting on into is requiring that third mandatory check of interstate. So more or less, if somebody's lived in Vermont their entire life and they haven't lived anyplace else, the interstate is not required because they've lived there their entire life. But that would only pertain to people like myself. If I wanted to go into the daycare business, then they would request the interstate back from Massachusetts for safe hiring.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
One thing that's kind of along the lines, because I know there's a big time delay from when somebody gets their fingerprints done to when you get them back. I know that AmeriCorps shifted over to a private provider that's approved with the Fed's field print and TrueScreen. May look into that. It's just really quick. It's in Vermont.
Yeah, but where it does state.
It does all the states.
What do you call that?
50
You
states.
can't start as a daycare or even as a school teacher until you get the first two back. It's the third one, the interstate, that can delay. You can start, and because that takes up to 90 days. That's the one that is delayed. So it's not necessarily you can start as a daycare without any of that background check back. No, it's the third one, the interstate.
But you're not, I don't want to sidetrack us onto the childcare side of things in terms of, starting a childcare or working in childcare.
No,
But I'm just, I'm just wondering if part of your interagency group is considering private providers.
Oh yeah, I have said before, and I'll say it again. I think the biggest drag on childcare capacity in the state right now is the timeline for fingerprint supported background checks.
Yeah.
So this is a top priority across all settings. And we have also, another solution that some states have looked at is creating a state level clearinghouse that allows, and some states have done so that, and that state level clearinghouse can clear for multiple purposes. but that relies on the agencies or the districts trusting the clearinghouse. And there is, right, a lot of sort of legal framework associated with that. And I think that's also the challenge, the practical challenge here is, if you're saying to school districts, you need to trust CDD checks without seeing the actual results, what came back on those returns yourself. Some schools, like, they might not be comfortable with that, right? And same with CDD. I don't know that we would we would have to have that discussion about, like, how comfortable are we about the fact we didn't actually get the criminal history report and we're saying you're okay to do this work. So that's part of it. So some of it is, like, it's practical related to timeline, it's practical related to just, like, the level of trust and liability kind of questions that come up.
Yeah. I mean, there's definite liability questions. But I understand that.
So that's just why
Yeah, if I may-
we're proposing
yeah.
a little more time to think through the solution. I also understand that it's been a long time without a solution. I don't deny that at all.
I do think, like, for me, the topic of liability is huge, especially like with this age group. Like, I just, I do worry about the administration, either agency or the school districts kind of taking that on without having, it just could really cause a lot of problems down the line if someone were to take them to court and say you didn't see, you just kind of trusted the information that you received without actually looking and having on file a criminal background check on the individual.
Yeah, and that, first off, that's not what this language says.
Okay.
Okay,
That's a bigger.
that's right.
Yeah.
That is not what this language says. This is saying that for schools, that the background check that they complete is deemed to have met whatever requirement for pre-qualification as a pre-qualified pre-K provider. So it's not saying that they have to rely on somebody else's background check. Which is, a bigger question about whether we do this, universally and, whatever the group, that Janet's working with comes up with. So I want to be clear, that's not what this language is saying. This language still requires the employer to have the background check. And we're talking about meeting a state requirement, not a federal requirement. It's a state requirement. And I think we need to be clear about that. So both would still be, on the private side, they'd still be meeting their requirements for the feds and the state.
Yeah.
On the education side, they'd be meeting requirements for the Fed, and we're proposing that would be sufficient for the state. So I appreciate the fact that it's been a long time for people in trying to figure this out, like 10 years. And I realize that, people are putting a really concerted effort into this. And as you said, you've put in more hours than you probably ever wish to know about background checks. Do people have any other questions for Jan? I mean, I think we know what the issues are and we have to decide whether we want to make that policy decision or not. Which of course will be changed down the line. Go ahead, Janet.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, like, if that change is made based on my current understanding of just, like, hearing it, right, knowing that it's and not having contact with my colleagues, I mean, that would mean that those programs would not meet the federal requirement to be a licensed childcare program, which means
I understand
they
that.
would not be eligible for childcare financial assistance.
Yes, if they're going to run a childcare program, they would have to meet all of the
Okay.
childcare requirements, and we probably should be explicit about
Yes.
saying that.
Yes.
But
So just wanted to be clear on that piece of it. And again, we would have to figure out an alternative, either a different license type or a different way to implement the health and safety standards than using our current center-based childcare license, because they wouldn't meet that. They would not meet that standard anymore, because we know that the background check that the school that's required of school districts doesn't meet the requirements for this CCDF. So I just am offering, like, we would need time to get that system
I
figured
understand.
out. Okay,
I understand. I want, yeah. I realize that this is new language that popped up today,
Yeah.
and so you haven't had a chance to really, sit with it and think about all of the, all of the issues with it. And this is obviously gonna, if it stays in, there's gonna be a lot of other discussion about this topic along the way.
I also wonder how many UPK, school-based UPK programs only offer 10 hours a week of UPK. Like how much, if we make this change, what is the impact of it, right? Like, is it going to impact? Because if they're offering any other childcare, they still have to go through the process as it is right now.
No.
So,
19.
Right,
There's
so,
19
yeah.
school districts right now who are offering some sort of extended childcare.
right, but I'm wondering how many are
Only
doing 10 hours.
Well, it doesn't have to be,
And that doesn't matter.
doesn't matter how many hours, if they're
Right.
only doing
If
it
they're only
as
doing
pre-K.
pre-K.
Right,
Doesn't matter how many hours.
how many hours?
Yeah.
But I'm picking up on, I think Ray's point is, for the sake of argument, there are 3 centers that only operate UPK for 10 hours a week and do no other childcare. Is the work we're asking the CDD to do, to potentially create a different class of license. Worth,
The way the language is written, I just want to have people go back to the language, which we will. It does not require a separate licensure. That's where Janet automatically went to. That's not what the language says. It says it's deemed to meet the qualifications for that requirement in their licensure. That's different.
it is.
Yeah. So, okay. Any final thoughts, Janet?
no, well, I need to connect with my colleagues on this.
I
so.
gotcha. Yeah, gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for the impromptu invitation and really appreciate your availability and clarifying for us, what's possible, what might not be possible, what's happening with the background check solutions that you're trying to put in place. So appreciate that very, very much. So you're welcome to stay on, but we're going to be shortly adjourning here because there's other things that we have to do. Okay. So where are we at, folks? I mean, the language as proposed says that the school district background check would be deemed to meet the background check requirements for CDD, or Ann's got it right in front of me. Can you-
Yeah, for for the purpose of pre-qualification pursuant to this section to have been met.
Right,
So it's very narrowly, explicitly for
the pre-qualification procedure.
pre-K
Yeah,
only. So if you're doing childcare, doesn't waive it.
if we decide to keep it in, then I think we should add a sentence or two that says, if the public school provides some extended day through the provision of childcare, utilizing childcare financial assistance, they would need to meet the full background check of the
CDD.
CDD one.
I can go with that. Because there is, just going through quickly, there is significant differences between CDD and the Vermont state. And one of the most significant differences is that it's not mandatory that they check the child sex offender registry or the abuse registries.
The schools don't have to.
They're not mandatory required. It can be requested. Yeah. It's not a mandatory requirement based upon the school. The superintendents can request those things.
Which is why we, in our first discussion, opted for, let's go with the CDD.
Yeah,
Right,
one
the
as
higher
meeting
standard.
The
Yeah.
higher standard.
Yeah.
The issue with that is the length of time it takes to get back. I know.
I think that reduces some significant, hey, we did our work. That's what it all comes down to. And sometimes putting the best effort and the best foot forward to do that due diligence will always reduce liability over the long haul. I understand it may be a little bit more, the response back may be a little bit longer, but
And part of
whatever you
the,
can do to mitigate risks.
right, I mean, I think part of it comes down to also when we're thinking about liability, as in the solution that we have in the bill right now, that language, it has each employer getting their own background check. And so the liability issue is off the table
Mhm.
because the employer has done their due, quote unquote, due diligence.
They are
and-
employed
and they-
by.
And they have the information from their own background checks.
Mhm.
And so I, that's another chick in the, leave it the way it is, in terms of the language. Yeah,
I mean, it would complicate things a little more, but the other possibility would say that the school districts must add to their background check for pre-K, the sex offender and child abuse registry. Because they can, I don't know. What-
On this point, I'm confused.
Top of
What
my
is the
head.
background check for if not for those kinds of things? Like, I'm
It's for,
confused.
it's, the fingerprinting is for crimes. It's a criminal background check.
But sex offense is a crime.
Well, yes, but they may not have been charged criminally, but they may be on the register
Okay, I see.
for child abuse.
I see. Okay,
So,
thank you. That
I'm
helps.
saying they like the elderly abuse registry, they might
Yeah.
have been, something
Okay,
they
that
had
helps.
gone on
Thank
up
you.
during their
And
employment and then they get, yeah.
Are there systems to check those sex offender registries nationwide? Because the one in Vermont is pretty easy for anyone to do.
right, we would
Publicly
we would
available.
only be able to
Any
do.
HR office could go on and.
To do those comprehensive background checks
well,
are a
yeah,
significant.
you need
amount of money.
fingerprinting for some of them.
For the comprehensive,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
to check the Vermont sex offender registry.
Oh, no, anybody can go on and check
Right.
that, yeah.
that's-
And the fact it's so fragmented, that there's so many different ones, that they're not all in one central place, kind of is not
Well, which is, which is the argument for Janet's approach, which is
Yeah.
leave it the way it is for right now. We're working on it
Come up
and
with
trying
a
to come up with a
Comprehensive
solution.
solution.
That's another option on the table. So I, it didn't seem as though the bees understood that there was this work group that's been happening or, I don't,
AOE's been very involved with the work groups.
yeah, at the state level, I
Yeah, at the
know,
state level.
yeah.
I think it's a much more intense conversation at the childcare level than it is in the AOE, in the education community.
Yeah, but it's really
it's
disturbing to learn that
yeah.
the schools aren't required to do,
What they're
We
required
could-
to do and what they do are probably two different things.
right, but if they were required to, that would address it. I mean, I can see saying, well, it's really important for 3 and 4-year-olds, that's why they have to have it, but it's important for 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds too, that their teachers are
They're all
not.
little kids, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll just say that I really appreciate us trying to find a solution. I don't feel satisfied with the amount of time we spent on this. Given Janet's hesitation and her concerns and not being able to talk to her colleagues with VC, IC and AOE, like it feels very last minute to me. And I just feel like, we could say, well, they could be fixed down, in the other committees or whatever. But for me, I'm hesitant to make a policy change like this, given the administration's hesitations with, and they may end up being fine with it. And I think if we give them time to kind of deliberate on it, talk to the legal counsel, and then maybe they can, we can follow it and say, okay, now everybody's okay with it, we can add it. I just feel like we haven't spent enough time on it to make a policy change like this.
Well, how?
And given the other work that's being done, right? Like there is very concerted efforts on fixing this problem, that there might be a much more elegant solution that we are not thinking about that is going to come in 6 months.
I would just, what Ray said.
Mhm.
yeah, I'm getting,
Slow down and speed up.
I'm getting there.
That's kind of where let's get all the information, slow it down before we agree 100. Yep.
Okay, So I'm seeing sort of head nods around the table about that approach. Would people, because there's gonna be a cover memo that goes with this, would people object to me putting in the cover memo that we considered this language, and highlighting for them that there is work happening between AHS and AOE and Department of Public Safety. And
that it may not be as simple as this.
right, that this might not be the solution, but here's language that we thought about.
And
be
yes,
good.
I would totally support that. And I can offer to continue the conversation with Janet kind of behind the scenes as this language moves to our other committees. And if, the administration comes up with something that can be included, we can, we still have a little bit of time.
There's still time, yeah.
Yeah, especially since you'll put in the memo that we're.
That
Yeah.
he's considering. I think though, I guess the one thing that I would encourage in the conversation is, I was finding the responses very narrowly thinking. And not necessarily think, like it kind of automatically went to, well, we'd have to create a whole nother process.
Right.
And that's not true.
Right.
And so, so that kind of, and I realized, we were asking her to comment on something like right off the
Just-
top.
yeah.
Right, I get that. And I known her long enough to know how
Yeah.
she needs time to think about things. So, okay, so that seems like we've reached a decision to take it out of the bill. I'll make some comments in the cover memo about it, and include the language to say that there is this process that's ongoing. This has been a problem for 10 years and we're, it really is something that needs to be
Yeah.
fixed. Yeah. And we can't just keep pushing it down the road. Okay, so I think that's it for right now. So do you want to let Katie and Beth know? Because you don't mind? Okay. All right, so we're going to take